and gentlemen, the books is in. The books are in. Yep. They're in. They're here.
Log in to KofiPaisaTV.com and get Spears of the Mossy Volume 1 by Kofi Paisa Research Team, from Spears the Pen Volume 2 by Kofi Paisa Research Team, Spiritual Combat Volume 3 by Kofi Paisa Research Team, One Night Before Bed by Any Harret Shun Calfunny, Kalawa's Trip to the Motherland by Kofi Paisa, From Cocaine to Consciousness by Any Harret Shun Calfunny, As I Learned, We All Learn by Kofi Paisa. Also, if you want fresh merch, go to our online store, Family Connect Apparel, and get all the brands. Also, get our 54 deck of quiz and educational cards available now on KofiPaisaTV.com.
Copyright Act 1976, copyright disclaimer. Under Section 107, the Copyright Act of 1976 allows is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. ETM Hotel, welcome in peace. My name is Sean. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to Science with Sean this evening. I'm only streaming on the Science with Sean channel, so I appreciate those of you who have liked it. I know that I think Brother Garfield still might be live, or people might be caught up in the drama of the whole scenario or situation with Polite. I'm hearing that they dropped the charges on dude regarding that little girl, or whatever that situation was. So that's none of my business. I'm not going to speak on it. And honestly, I don't even care. But I do want to say what up, Unbiased. What up from West Africa, Dave B, Nunu, Marlon. What's good, Tika? Zane, what up? Stacey, what's good? Sutek, what the business is. Keenan, what the business is. Like the show, share the show, tell a friend, tell a friend. I sent the link to a couple people, but I really ain't posted it on social media like that. So yeah, appreciate everybody. So what I want to talk about today is this whole thing about viral load and its importance relating to SARS-CoV-2. Because you get people, right? They get hella caught up in that. And and they say certain things, or they say it out of context, or they make claims, and they never really fully explain what it is that they're referring to or talking about. So it is what it is when it comes to that. And I just want to kind of be brief, just be brief, build on that a little bit, just to kind of help people stay within the know and see what the science is actually saying. What up, Pure? What's good, bro? Golly, let me see what's going on. Garfield must got y'all shook up. Y'all listening to thunder over there. Yeah, give me a second. Let me send this out. Try to see what's going on. Is it still live or they ended it? He ended it. Oh man, it's crazy. All right, anyway. Back to this message at hand. Yeah, man, hit the like button. Like the show, share the show. I see some of y'all in the building. Let's get to it. I'll just take what I get. All right, so first let's define what viral load is, right? Let's start there. So of course the sources are in the description of the video, and you can download this PDF if you want. But viral load refers to the amount of the virus in an infected person's blood. Viral load refers to the amount of the virus in an infected person's blood. This is expressed as the number of viral particles in each milliliter of blood. Higher viral load can have different implications for different viruses, but typically means the infection is progressing. Viral load and how it is measured. Viral load tests measure the quantity of genetic material commonly. Let me stop. I read that twice, so I hope that everybody understood exactly what viral load is. It is the amount of what in the blood? The amount of the virus in the infected in the person's blood. So viral load refers to the amount of the virus that is in an infected person's blood, okay? Now, now that we know that it is the amount of the virus in an infected person's blood, we now can see how it's measured. So when we're having a conversation with people and they're saying that the viral loads are the same in a natural infected person and a vaccinated person, then we should be asking the question, how do you know that? And then the person or whoever, if they're saying this or that, then they have to bring out how they know that, right? We want to know this so that we know who we're dealing with and what we're dealing with and how we can pursue forward. Now, we've heard a lot of things about viral load, right? That, they usually say this is the amount of the virus. They're saying that this is how people pass the virus off, or, they're referring to virus shedding, and they're trying to use viral load improperly. So viral load test measures the quantity of genetic material, commonly your RNA, of a virus presented in your blood. Several tests are typically done over an extended period, with initial measurements serving as the baseline of subsequent measurements compared to this. Viral load measurements can differ daily, and therefore long-term trends are used to evaluate disease progression. So here it is. You have three main tests used to measure viral load, right? We know this. We know you have the PCR test. All right, reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction test. Then you have the branched DNA test, and then you have the nucleic acid sequence-based amplification test. And then these tests report viral load results differently, which means it is crucial to be consistent in the tests used throughout the monitoring. Let me be specific when we talk about the testing, there is no set test across the country that doctors are dealing with that is the standard. Okay, there's no standardized test. Like when they go and measure regarding SARS-CoV-2. Now, regarding SARS-CoV-2 testing, there's no set testing. There's 3 different tests. Now, there's examples out there where there's a multitude of tests. I mean, that there's a specific test for other viruses and how they can measure viral load and be more accurate, because there isn't one key test that scientists, doctors, and everybody can agree upon. We have 3 tests right now measuring the viral loads, and we don't know if that is very accurate at this juncture. Okay, so there's some um, testing hesitation regarding the PCR, the BDNA, and the NASBA. Okay, I'm just trying to be forthcoming. You don't believe me? I can play a clip where you'll hear Rack and Yellow get into the viral load testing and so forth. And I may do that for y'all anyway, because I like to refer you to the experts, so I'm just not making up stuff. All right, now regardless, the viral load test should be able to consistently measure levels of virus down to 50 copies per 1 milliliter. They also need to have high specificity for the target virus and have reducible and therefore comparable results. This is key. So that viral load test should be down to the 50 copies per milliliter. That can help them get as accurate as they actually can from results. Now, so how do we interpret the data? That is a big thing. I'm not doing PCR testing. I'm not at home doing a PCR test. You're not at home doing a PCR test. Although they're making at-home kits, we're not doing any of those things. However, we can learn how to do these tests in case they make at-home kits that are PCR related, and that is the standard for testing, for measuring the viral load, and we can then know more. So let's see what we can get out of this first article. All right, it says as viral load increases, the disease is seen as progressing. We know that because it told us this earlier. Once you're infected, how it is measured in your blood. So we know now. Now, however, if measurements show the viral load decreasing over several individual testing occasions, the infection is interpreted as being suppressed. So now we know if we see a high load, right, a high viral load, meaning the virus is progressing. If we see a low load over testing, this means that it is suppressed. Now, monitoring viral load throughout an infection can also show how well, if at all, a patient is responding to treatment. This is key, because what if you've been infected, you've got monoclonal antibody treatment, you did a PCR test, and you see stuff going in different directions? It seems like it's suppressed. You know what I mean? You got to be able to measure up. So now we know when we go and we get these tests, we know what they're testing for and what they're measuring. I'm going to say that again. When we get these tests, we know what they're testing for, right? They're trying to check the viral load in your blood. And then we know what they're measuring, right? They're looking for that magic number, 50 copies per 1 milliliter. And they're trying to see if it's suppressed or if it's aggressive and moving forward. Now, let's go. So viral load measurements can be critically important in the treatment of certain diseases. And then it gets into HIV-1 particles associated with the CD4 T cell destruction and thus faster progression towards AIDS, right? HIV is the virus. AIDS is the disease. Okay. Now I'm gonna skip a little bit of this. As you can see, that R naught number here, right? I'm gonna skip a little bit of this because I'm gonna come to it in a different article, but I want to kind of get down to viral load in COVID because I want to be more specific and not viral load in HIV. So let's go ahead and see what we can learn right here.
Hello guys, today we will discuss about viral load and viral shedding, how it is related to new infection and treatment outcome, why it is important to know. So let's start. Viral load is a numerical expression of the quantity of virus in a given volume of body fluid, usually blood plasma. It is measured as a number of virus particles per ml of body fluid. A higher viral load often correlates with the severity of an active viral infection. Tracking viral load is used to monitor therapy during chronic viral infection. Now, what is viral shedding? Viral shedding refers to the expulsion and release of virus progeny following successful reproduction during a host cell infection. Once the replication has been completed and the host cell is exhausted of all resources in making viral progeny, the viruses may begin to leave the cell by several methods. In simple words, this is an ongoing process in which your cells are dying and tons of new viruses coming out of the cells. The term viral shedding is used in different ways. The shedding can be from one part of the body to another part of the body, and shedding from bodies into the environment where the virus may infect other bodies. This last point is very important because contagiousness of a viral disease depends on the environmental shedding. A person with a viral disease is contagious if they are shedding virus. The rate at which the infected person sheds virus over time is therefore a considerable interest. In this stage, one can infect many other people. According to a recent article published on Nature Medicine, infectiousness starts at least 2 days before the symptom onset. That means a person can infect other person at that time even when they are not showing any symptom. The infectivity reaches its peak 2 days before and 1 day after the onset of symptom. After symptom onset, viral loads decrease monotonically. Virus can be detected.
All right, so I'm gonna stop him right there because he's talking virus shedding, but he should come back to viral load. And this is where the misconception comes in at, is because they talk about the two. Well, some people that are explaining certain things, they talk about the two with hand in hand, and this what causes confusion. This is why you'll have people talk about viral load and then talk about vaccine shedding, right? They don't know. Viral load has nothing to do with, well, it has something to do with the other per se, but they're two different. I just told you what viral load is. And for those who just came on, I just want to give it to you again. Viral load refers to the amount of the virus in an infected person's blood. That has nothing to do with viral shedding. Viral shedding, which what he just basically explained is a process that you go through once you've been infected with a virus. And the virus shedding, specifically speaking about COVID-19, could be 2 to 10 days in asymptomatic or symptomatic carriers, and then immunocompromised could shed could shed the virus as much as 20 plus days. There's been some instances where this has gone over 20 days. Delta variant has increased viral shedding. All right. But we're worried about virus load, the amount of the virus that's in your blood. So viral load in COVID-19. Most of the previous research on viral loads has focused on HIV, partly because it is a close link to the disease progression and because HIV is one of the highest profile viral infections. Recent research efforts have focused on COVID-19 and the viral loads of Sars-CoV-2, but this research is still new. So let me be specific. COVID-19 is the disease. So the efforts have focused on the disease and the viral load of SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus. So when we're talking about viral load is referring to the virus, okay? But their research efforts is focused on the disease and the virus. So simultaneously, I just don't want to confuse anybody because we have people that are marrying SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 as one when one causes the other. Now, the causative virus of COVID-19, the disease, is closely related to SARS-CoV, the virus, which caused an epidemic in the early 2000s. SARS-CoV viral loads in the blood grew from initially modest viral loads in the respiratory tracts. In contrast to this, SARS-CoV-2 viral loads appear to be higher in the nose than in the throat. Now, if you've listened to Science with Sean before, or you've paid attention to the standard, Vincent Racaniello, Dr. Vincent Racaniello, who's also a teacher, he talks about they're doing the nasal swabbing and them finding a large amount of the viral loads in the nasal part, right? Because it's one of the main pathways that they can do the nasal swabbing and testing to see how much of the viral loads you have, or how much of the infection you have in your nasal cavities. I should say it like that. That's more specific to what he normally says. Now, research on the SARS-CoV-2 virus also showed the viral loads peaked at 10 to 14 days, right? We're talking about peaking. So this is the amount of, right, the viral load that's showing up, how much is in your bloodstream. And then they're saying that it peaks between 10 to 14 days. Okay, this is another reason why you're quarantining for such a period of time. But the quarantining is more related to viral shedding, not viral loading. All right, and we're going to tie together. So here you go. Symptoms appear first. Now, in SARS-CoV-2, the highest viral load appears to be earlier within the first week of symptom onset. Okay, so the higher load is within the first week, and then it regresses. Okay, now this is more consistent with the pattern seen in influenza. So now they know a pattern. Viral loads in COVID-19 patients have also been found in asymptomatic patients. These are people who have mild to no symptoms. These have been similar to those in symptomatic patients, people with, more moderate symptoms, which suggests they have a similar ability to transmit the infection. It has been shown that asymptomatic individuals can pass on the disease, which is part of what has made the disease so easily transmissible. More data and better understanding of how viral load correlates with a cultural viable virus are needed to further determine transmission dynamics and advise screening practices. All right, so that's that article. So we get through with that. Now we want to deal with the topic of the discussion. Man, I've been vaccinated. I'm fully vaccinated. I didn't caught a breakthrough infection. What the hell is going on? Right? Let's get to it, because we're dealing with information where people are not privy to it and they jump all over the window and we lose them very quickly out of ignorance. So the title of this is Breakthrough Infection Viral Load. What does this mean to you? We're going to deal with Dr. Dahl. She's over at VCU, which is Virginia, right? We've seen this before. Well, you may not have seen this specific article, but, she's over at the university. So let's deal with it. With COVID-19, your best protection is vaccination. But what's this we're hearing about breakthrough infections, viral load? It's getting so complicated. So Dr. Doyle, who is an infectious disease expert, explains what breakthrough infections and viral load means and why these terms are in the news. So what is a breakthrough infection? What is viral load? Breakthrough infection refers to the case in which a person vaccinated against COVID-19, the disease, nonetheless becomes infected with the virus. Viral load refers to the amount of the virus that can be detected in an infected person. Now, we know that they use the test to see how much of the viral load you have in your bloodstream, but they also do nasal swabbing to check your nasal cavities and stick way up in there and see how much of that virus you got in you. Now, high viral loads are concerning because they mean the person is more infectious. Now, mind you, okay, the vaccines prevent the spread of infectious disease. Keep that in mind. Why are breakthrough infections and viral load in the news these days? The CDC recently published an analysis of clusters of infections driven by the Delta variant. They found that a large portion of those infected in the clusters had been fully vaccinated. Furthermore, viral loads were similar between those vaccinated and unvaccinated, suggesting that vaccinated individuals who develop breakthrough infections are very capable of transmitting the infection to other people. Okay? This is what the fuss is. Remember now, people are running around and they're saying certain things. Now, so how likely am I to get a breakthrough infection? How contagious is the Delta variant? The Delta variant is more contagious than other variants. This we know. According to the CDC, it is approximately 50% more infectious than the Alpha variant, which was the dominant variant in the UK as well as the US earlier in its earlier onset. Delta has emerged as the dominant variant. Therefore, the weaker variants have taken a back seat. And, you know, us vaccinated people were protected against those other variants so good that we don't really, you know, we're not being really phased. You still can be infected by those other variants. There's just a smaller percentage. So the risk of breakthrough infection depends on a lot of factors. And this is what people need to take into account. So including how prevalent COVID-19 is in the local community, how prevalent the Delta variant is in a community, and to what extent risk mediation strategies are being employed, such social distancing, masking, and avoiding high-risk activities like large crowds and poorly ventilated indoor spaces. Do people with breakthrough infections get just as sick as those who were never vaccinated? Good question. The quick answer for Taharka is no. The good news is that the vaccine continues to offer protection from what? Severe disease. What did I say the vaccine protects against? The spread of infectious disease. So severe disease, you're good money. In general, those who are vaccinated but go on to develop breakthrough infections are less likely to be hospitalized or develop severe disease. And you can go ahead and slide in death. All right. Of course, other factors can affect severity of disease, such as underlying medical conditions and the ability of the immune system to respond to the vaccine. Also, age has a lot to do with breakthrough infections as well. If you need me to get to that, I can go to the CDC study where we'll break down and show you how many people over the age of 60 had breakthrough infections. It's a lot. I mean, let me take that back. Out of the data that the CDC has, out of 11,000, there was a large portion of that 11,000 that like 50 or 60% of that 11,000 that was over the age of 60. That's what I mean by the a lot, based on the 11,000 number that we had. Now, if most people with breakthrough infections don't get severely ill, what's the big deal? Well, breakthrough infections can readily transmit the virus through our communities. It is a big problem that will put the brakes on efforts to resume activities on our lives before COVID-19. If the pool of vulnerable people is large enough, then we can easily return to surges of infection that overwhelm the healthcare system. So let's take, for instance, the Barnstool study in Massachusetts. This study was cherry-picked online, shared hundreds of thousands of times, but people were misinterpreting the data. In that data, you had a whole bunch of fully vaccinated people. You had 0 deaths. you had like 5 people go to the hospital. Out of the 5, 1 was unvaccinated. So you had 4 people who had breakthrough infections that ended up in the hospital. All 4 of the people who were fully vaccinated was released. All right. And then you had some people that had asymptomatic response. What Barnstool study showed us was that the vaccine prevented, out of the larger group, right? Out of that, all the people that was involved in Barnstool that was fully vaccinated, it prevented hospitalizations and deaths at a high clip, over 99%. And you had 0 deaths in that. That is a high clip. And then the asymptomatic responses were lower, which means that people who did experience a breakthrough infection was low. And then people who had a severe infection, there really wasn't. I mean, well, yeah, you'll say some people was hospitalized, so you'll say 5. So you had I think the number was 74% of the people was hospitalized, and people was throwing that number up, but they wasn't really looking at the data to see that, oh, it really wasn't that many people, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of weird. Now let's get back to the point. Although many people recover from COVID-19 or have mild or no symptoms, there is no cure. Our in-hospital care remains supportive. More than 600,000 people in the country died. To be more specific, over 654,000 as of yesterday. We know that 1,600 people are dying a day, so that number is 65 or 66,000 people that could be dead today. Overall, I mean the updated number. Now, it remains a deadly disease. We must do everything we can to avoid the spread. Does this mean that the relaxation we've been enjoying in terms of mask wearing, social distancing must come to an end? Should I cancel my vacation plans? Nah, they're not going to tell you to cancel your plans. So some of this I'm not going to read, but like I said, it's in the article. We can go from there. So that was some good information from Dr. Cole, just kind of answering some questions in an article related stance that gives us some perspective on breakthrough infections and what it means to us. It was serious, but not where we should be panicking and people going crazy talking about, oh, another breakthrough. Nah, come on. Now, I want to say this. If Moderna is 88% effective against Delta, then there's a 12% chance of people that have been fully vaccinated with Moderna should experience a breakthrough. So let's just say you have 60 million people. So you should have somewhere around 6.8 million or 7.2 million people. This is off the top of my head. I don't know how close I am, but 7.2 million people who took Moderna that are fully vaccinated should have a breakthrough infection. Do we have 7.2 million people? Or we can, well, yeah, that's 10%. Do we have 7.2 million breakthrough infections? No, we don't have 7.2 million breakthrough infections. So let's go to Pfizer. Pfizer is 64% infectious against the Delta variant, unless you get a booster shot, and then it'll take you back up to 95% infectious. However, so that's what the Israel study is saying per se. I don't put a lot of stake in it, but anyway, we don't need boosters. 64% infectious. That means there is a 36% chance of a breakthrough infection. All right, so we know that data. So now let's just say 60 million people, right? You see where I'm going with that? So you're looking at 30%. So half of that is 30, and then half of that is 25. So you got to go up to, not 20, I'm tripping. So you got 60, half of that is 30, and then you cut that down and go to 15. So you're going to be somewhere around 20 to 25. Well, let's just say 22, right? So let's say 22, 22 million out of 60. Let's just do that math. Should be breakthrough infections. Do we have 22 million? No. We don't have 22 million people. We don't have, so 22 million plus the 7 million that we just talked about with Moderna. We don't have 30 million people in the fully vaccinated group that have breakthrough infections. This is what we should be seeing from Delta. We ain't even got 100,000 breakthrough infections. Even if we got 100,000 breakthrough infections, that's still not even 1% of the total vax. We got to see millions of people with breakthrough infections. All right. So what is viral load? This is a PDF. I'm going to blow this up. And I apologize again for the people on YouTube who may not have been able to see pretty clearly, and you might have been on your cell phone. I'm going to take this to 150. Maybe this will be able to help you all see a little bit clear. I don't know. I know y'all listening to me, kind of rocking with me and vibing. So like I said, the sources are always in the description of the video. Yeah, Sutek. So really, Sutek, what I'm doing is I'm using the math, right? We ain't stupid, man. We know how to count. We know how to get to percentages. And, you know, I'm just coming off the top of the head with the numbers. But my thing is that if we're supposed to see breakthrough numbers in the 20 millions based on the fully vaccinated group we have, or even 30 million people, bro, we just ain't seeing it. And I didn't even include Johnson & Johnson because there was 16 or maybe 20 million people who took that. So out of that group, we're supposed to see 40% of those people. Yeah, about 44% of those people. So 44%, a potential 44% risk factor, right? Because it's 56% infectious against Delta. So there's a 44% chance. So if there's a 44% chance of you having a breakthrough infection, that means out of that group of 20 something million, it should be, you know, you see what I'm saying? Like 8 to 10 million, 8 to 9 million people. And you don't see that. So then that takes the number up to over, close to 40 million people should have experienced a breakthrough infection. We don't have that type of data. We don't in the fully vaccinated group. We ain't even got 100,000 breakthrough infections. So we're in panic mode about breakthrough infections and we're overreacting. All right. So again, viral load again. What is viral load and why so many healthcare workers getting sick? Again, viral load has to deal with what, ladies and gentlemen? The viral load is simply how much viruses you have in your body. In medical terms, it refers to how much virus is measured in a standard volume of fluid, usually your blood. It is commonly used for HIV, which we talked about, so it's a little redundant. What does it mean for COVID-19 transmission? The infectious dose is the amount of the virus that's in an individual to be exposed to for them to pick up the virus. With the flu viruses, individuals only need to pick up a small amount of the particles for them to become sick. In COVID, scientists don't yet know how big a dose a person needs to be exposed to, but it is likely to be relatively small because of the high number of people becoming sick. If I get a higher dose of virus, does that mean I will be sicker? Yes. Work on 2 other coronaviruses, severe acute respiratory and MERS, has shown this. Okay. Now, on the basis of previous work on SARS and MERS, we know the exposure to higher doses are associated with the worst outcome. This may be likely in the case of COVID-19 as well. So they're unsure, but they're trying to use previous history and studies to say, yes, we should see something very similar from previous events. Now, in general, with respiratory viruses, the outcome of infection, whether you get severely ill or only get mild cold, can sometimes be determined by how much virus actually you got in your body. Okay. And started the infection, the infection off. Now, it's all about the size of the armies on each side of the battle. And a very large virus army is difficult for our immune system's army to fight off. Age and whether you have underlying conditions play a significant role in the severity of the disease and outcome. Can I have a high viral load but not become ill? Confusingly, it does seem that levels of viral load seem to affect people different. Doctors studying an outbreak in Lombardy in northern Italy looked at more than 5,000 people, compared their nasal swabs and those who had symptoms with those who did not. They found no difference in viral load between the two groups. I'm going to say this again because this is science. Doctors studying the outbreak in Lombardy in northern Italy looked at more than 5,000 people and compared nasal swabs of those who had symptoms with those who did not. They found no difference in viral load between the two groups. However, this is what they said. Because they only studied a small number of people without symptoms, they could not draw a firm conclusion. This goes back to what Rackaniello said about this whole viral load thing. We just don't have enough evidence to say that people who are fully vaccinated can shed the virus. The assumption is, yes, they can shed the virus. Do we know how many days? Maybe 2 or 3 days that the virus shedding can take place in a fully vaccinated person that's been infected with SARS-CoV-2. We just don't have enough data to be specific about vaccinated people passing the virus on. All right. Are some people more at risk than others? Yes. Healthcare workers are hella risk. They fighting the virus every day, and they got shortages and they're working 24 hours a day. Some people, they're sick, not 24, but 16 hours a day. And some even sleeping at hospitals on different floors and not even getting enough rest. And then you got shortages everywhere. You got people that can't even work. You got people that's getting sick that can't work. You got so many complications. They're paying nurses now, traveling nurses, like $10,000 in some instances a month. Some people making $3,000 or $4,000 a week just to go to a whole nother state and a whole nother hospital and work. Make me feel like I wish I was a nurse right now. But people are caring for people and things of that nature. So I really didn't get into this paragraph. So I'm gonna move a little bit on. When I am most likely to transmit the virus to others. So here's a study. Now, a study of 9 patients with mild symptoms found that their peak shedding period, that is when they are most infectious, was within a week of first showing symptoms. However, by day 10, they were unlikely to pass the disease on. The study, one of the first to map them when people actively transmit the illness, showed the patients emitted extremely high amounts of the virus at the early stage. All right. When was the peak shedding? The peak shedding was most infectious, typically around 5 days. Picking up the disease in patients emitted 1,000 times more virus than during the peak shedding of SARS-CoV-2. So there's a difference. You have a viral load, and then you have a viral shedding. 2 different things. Now, how many healthcare workers have fallen ill? Of course, they're going to give you information on that. Of course, this PDF is in the description of the video. You know how I'm rocking. So let's go a little step further. Let me blow this up. And there was a study, right? The Oxford study does not say that fully vaccinated healthcare workers carry 250 times viral load compared to the unvaccinated people. So there was a claim that went out in regard to that. So let's deal with the Oxford study and see what it says. And we can come back and look at the other information. So this is somebody's Twitter handle by Daily Exposed. It was, posted on the 24th. It says this about the study. Oxford University study finds fully vaccinated healthcare workers carry 250 times more viral load compared to unvaccinated, proving the COVID jabs make you worse. This was the claim. Let's deal with the facts.
This social media post claims.
Hold up. Now I know y'all know I hit Full screen.
This social media post claims that
I
an
won't even let
Oxford
me go
study
full.
has found that
I'm trying to go full screen. Give me a second. There we go.
It's time to help people customize and
Come on, man. I got y'all. Trust me.
fully vaccinated healthcare workers carry 251 times the viral load compared to the unvaccinated, proving that the COVID-19 vaccines are bad for you. We did an internet search about such a study and found two articles that make the same claim as in the post. These articles cite a preprint paper by the Oxford University Clinical Research Group published on 10th August 2021 in The Lancet. However, the findings of the paper are that viral loads of breakthrough Delta variant infection cases were 251 times higher than those of cases infected with old strains detected between March-April 2020. The paper does not say that there was a difference between viral loads in vaccinated and unvaccinated people. According to the paper, the authors are investigating breakthrough SARS-CoV-2 Delta variant infections among double vaccinated healthcare workers of a major infectious diseases hospital in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. This is a preprint paper that is not yet peer-reviewed. In general, peer-reviewed papers are more credible. A Lancet page states that preprints should not.
All right. So she talking where you may not be able to understand them, but she just went over what Unc already been telling y'all about preprints. She's saying this was published as a preprint, and she's saying the findings should not be used for clinical or public health decisions making, you know, what normal preprints normally say. So she's getting through that, but hopefully y'all can read what's being said down here. I'm gonna go back a little bit because I want y'all to be able to pick up what she's putting down. So if you can't hear what she's saying, just read the bottom.
Double vaccinated healthcare workers of a major infectious diseases hospital in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. This is a preprint paper that is not yet peer-reviewed. In general, peer-reviewed papers are more credible. A Lancet page states that preprints should not be used for clinical decision-making or reporting of research to a lay audience without indicating that it is preliminary research that has not been peer-reviewed. A Reuters fact check on a similar claim quotes the senior communications officer for the Center for Tropical Medicine at the Oxford University Clinical Research Unit saying that this study is about the Delta variant and explaining breakthrough cases among vaccinated healthcare workers because of the Delta variant. There is no focus on unvaccinated versus the vaccinated cases. According to the USA Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Delta variant is highly contagious and more than twice as contagious as previous variants. Their website says, for people infected with the Delta variant, similar amounts of viral genetic material have been found among both unvaccinated and fully vaccinated people. However, like prior variants, the amount of viral genetic material may go down faster in fully vaccinated people when compared to unvaccinated people. According to a recent Oxford University Office for National Statistics study, infected people who are doubly vaccinated carry the same amount of viral load for the Delta variant as unvaccinated people. However, COVID-19 vaccines offer protection against symptomatic infection, and fully vaccinated people are less likely to contract COVID-19 in the first place. As the Oxford study in question does not say that fully vaccinated healthcare workers carry 251 times viral load compared to the unvaccinated, this post is fake. When you come across a piece of news that seems too ridiculous to be true, don't leave things to doubt. Run searches on Google and Yandex and weigh out.
They do a pretty good job at, you know, kind of beating up fact checks for the foreigners. You know what I'm saying? So they just proved it to be false. And the article simply go through all of that. And, you know, it's some good stuff right here. That's in the description of the video. So let's move on a little bit. So how do vaccinated people spread Delta? This is what the science says. This was published on the 12th of August. And people should know this. When earlier field data showed that vaccinated people cuts transmission of SARS-CoV-2 virus, researchers was cautiously optimistic. But they warned that many of those studies, although promising, took place before the fast-spreading Delta variant proliferated worldwide. Now, reports from various countries seem to confirm what scientists feared. After the variant tore through India with alarming speeds in April and May, Delta is more likely than other variants to spread through vaccinated people. Delta from COVID-19 tests in the US, UK, Singapore, showing that vaccinated people who became infected with Delta SARS-CoV-2 can carry as much virus in the nose as do unvaccinated people. This means that despite the protection offered by the vaccine, a proportion of the vaccinated people can pass on Delta, possibly aiding its rise. This is the key word right here, because this is uncertain. It says possibly. Okay. Now, people who have Delta virus and happen to have breakthrough infections can carry these really high level of the viruses and can unwittingly spread the virus to others, says David O'Connor, a virologist at Wisconsin-Madison. But listen to what he says specifically, because the pseudo try to use this. The findings underscore the importance of protective measures such as wearing masks indoors to reduce transmission. Researchers stressing that COVID-19 vaccines are protective against serious illness and death, but the data of Delta transmission showed that people who are vaccinated still need to take precaution. Testing transmissibility. O'Connor colleagues in Madison and Dane County healthcare infections in Wisconsin in June and July. This is what they come up with. The team used PCR testing, which are widely used to confirm COVID-19 infection, to estimate concentrations of viruses in the nasal fluid samples. These tests detected the virus genetic material by amplifying DNA until it is detectable as a fluorescent signal. The number of amplification cycles needed to get a signal, a measure called the cycle threshold value of CT, serves as a proxy for viral concentration in samples. The lower a sample CT, the more viral genetic material presents. Now, in a preprint on August 11th, researchers compared CT values of 719 people between the 29th of June and the 31st of July, during which 90% of 122 coronavirus samples they sequenced were Delta. Of 311 vaccinated people who tested positive for SARS-CoV-2 in that group, the CT value was less than 25, a level at which researchers expect the presence of infectious disease. I think it has to be over around there or over 30. So let's see what it says. At a level, researchers expect the presence of infectious disease. So to confirm this, the team cultured 55 samples that had CT values less than 25 from vaccinated and unvaccinated people and detected infectious viruses in nearly everyone. Most unvaccinated people also had CT values below this level. Now, the bottom line is this can happen. It can be true that vaccinated people can spread the virus, but we don't know yet what their relative role in overall community spread is, says Thomas Friedrich, a virologist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm going to say it again. He said the bottom line is this can happen. It can be true that vaccinated people can spread the virus, but we don't know yet. So it goes back and brings up the data from the Provincetown town of Massachusetts, right, which has similar findings. And then in that, they talked about the gathering at the beach. Nearly 3/4 of 469 new COVID cases occurred in the state in vaccinated people. Both vaccinated and unvaccinated people had comparatively low CT values, indicating high viral loads. And of the 133 sample sequence, 90% identified Delta. So when they do the nasal swabbing and sequencing and things of that nature, they can tell that it's Delta, Alpha, Omega, Theta, Phi, Beta, Q, Mu. You know what I'm saying? All the Greeks in the house. Now, the findings prompted the CDC updated its guidance on the 27th of July, once again recommended that people in all areas of transmission wear masks. So this was the whole thing. They took the precaution to say, hey, look, everybody need to put back on their masks. All right, cool. Now, the results were linked in big gatherings, but Wisconsin didn't have similar activity suggesting that small household gatherings could also help Delta to spread. So different biology in Houston, Texas, where Houston Methodist Hospital team has been sequencing logging SARS-CoV-2 variants for almost every COVID-19 case in the hospital. About 17% were Delta cases in vaccinated people since March, nearly 3 times the rate of breakthrough infections compared with all other variants combined. Patients with Delta SARS-CoV-2 also stayed in the hospital slightly longer than did people infected with other variants. There's potentially a slightly different biology to the infection. Musser, who is a molecular pathologist and a director at the hospital, said that the levels of the CT levels were similar in vaccinated and unvaccinated people. However, vaccinated people with Delta might remain infectious for a shorter period, according to researchers in Singapore who tracked viral loads each day of COVID-19 infection among people who had been vaccinated. Now, who had and hadn't been vaccinated. Delta viral loads were similar in both groups for the first week of infection, but dropped quickly after day 7 in vaccinated people. Given the high virus levels seen in the first week of the illness with Delta, measures such as mask and hand hygiene, which can reduce transmission, are important for everyone, regardless of vaccination status. Barnaby Young, an infectious disease clinician at the National Center for Infectious Disease in Singapore, says one massive analysis of Delta transmission comes from the UK REACT. In this, they test more than 100,000 UK volunteers. They ran CT analysis samples from May, June, and July, when Delta was rapidly replacing other variants to become the dominant driver of COVID-19. The results suggested that among the positive testing who had been vaccinated had a lower viral load on average than did unvaccinated. So in the case of the UK, regarding 100,000 people, the viral load in the vaccinated group was less than the viral load in the unvaccinated people. Now, Elliott, which is an epidemiologist, stated that the results from the CT studies, because this study sampled the population at random and included people who tested positive without showing symptoms, said the findings, along with an increase in the case of younger people who have not yet received both jabs, underscore the effectiveness of double vaccination against Delta. So they think it's really, really important to get as many people vaccinated, double vaccinated, and particularly those in a younger group. Think you may have seen this earlier, talk about the 251 times. I just put this in here for kicks and giggles. It's a 5-minute read. It deals with what this previous article already dealt with. So it kind of gives you some leverage there. I do want to play a video for y'all real quick. Give me 1 second and I'm gonna pull that up. And I just want to put your I just want to lay something on your brain real quick. I want to lay something on your brain, man. And then I'm gonna play it how it go. So let me try to find.
It's Dr. Vincent Racaniello. He is a microbiologist at Columbia University and host of This Week in Virology podcast. So we are glad to have you with us all the way from New Jersey today. Thank you. But first, let's check in with Dr. Hawkinson.
Hi.
Tell us about the COVID count.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have a total of 103 patients right now, but of those, 55 are active infections with 16 in the ICU and 12 on the ventilator. We have 10 of those 55 active infections that are fully vaccinated. So that is 18% fully vaccinated. But as we stated yesterday, a lot of those patients are actually able to get third doses. So they are immunosuppressed patients. We still have 48.
All right. So what this doctor is referring to is people at his hospital. Okay. All right. He's referring to people at his hospital. All right. He's saying 18% of the people that are in his hospital out of this group that's hospitalized are people that have been vaccinated. But these people out of this 18%, he said specifically, are immunocompromised, meaning that they can get an extra shot. So these people are already susceptible to something. But this is not what I wanted to do here. I wanted to kind of get to, let me see if I can find it, because I didn't mark the timestamp.
Is because people come out of lockdown, they get together, and they transmit the virus. And we've made that point over and over again, that please, probably there are other immune activities involved, like T cells. So it's really complicated, and science takes a long time.
Did you help Pfizer come up with this dadgum name for their vaccine, Chromari, whatever? I mean, it sounds like that.
Vaccine. Can we talk about Novavax? Who wants to jump in first?
Yeah, what happened to
Doctor?
it? No, I think that's right. What we say we don't try to jack with the truth, because there are a lot of flapjackers out there, people who flap their arms and jack with the truth. To understand that the root of fear is not found in just being angry, angry in return.
Can we get to some community questions?
Can I ask you one more question?
Please do. Go ahead. Here's the first question.
No,
you go.
I'm the community this time. I get the first one. I get the first one. Okay. Vaccination and pregnancy. Is it safe to give a woman who is pregnant the COVID vaccine?
I don't see any convincing data that say it causes more serious disease. In fact,
Hold on, let's go back.
Into the cycle of continual.
Dad?
No, I think.
Oh, okay. I thought you were
shaking my head.
You're agreed.
I think.
And I can quote Spock as well as just about anybody.
We love our nerds around here.
That's what we do. Live long and prosper.
Right.
I'm gonna get back to that.
Doctor,
that pregnancy
I'm going to ask you a
question.
few questions. I'm sure we're going to have questions from our community, and both Dr. Hawkinson and Dr. Seitz will have questions for you as well. But I'm going to just squeeze a few in here. So some of the questions that we get daily on this show, and I just want your insight and your thoughts. Do the vaccines not work well anymore after a few months? That's something people ask about. What are your thoughts?
Well, of course they work well. And whenever you ask, do the vaccines work, you always have to define what you mean by work. And this is a problem I see in the mass media. They don't define it. So what does work mean? The vaccines were tested originally to prevent COVID of all kinds. They were never tested to prevent infection. In fact, most human vaccines don't prevent infection. What they do is prevent disease. The polio vaccines famously do not prevent you from getting infected with polio virus, but they do prevent you from getting polio. And it's the same with the COVID vaccines. And so why is that? Shortly after the COVID vaccines were tested, everyone who got the vaccines had high antibody levels. So indeed, that did prevent infection. But naturally, antibody and T cell levels decline after vaccination, and therefore people started to be infected. And it began this whole narrative that the vaccines are failing. But they still, to this day, no matter what variant is involved, the vaccines will save your life. They will prevent you from getting serious illness, and they will prevent you from dying. So the answer is the vaccines still work very, very well when you define it as preventing serious COVID.
Let's talk about boosters. I know you wanted to mention that, and that's something people ask about daily here as well. What are you hearing from your public?
So many people are confused about the narrative around boosters. As you know, the CDC has suggested that, well, for certain populations, boosters are certainly indicated for immunocompromised populations, but they're indicating that maybe the general population is going to need a booster. What's that based on? It's based on the fact that antibody levels decline after vaccination, which they do normally for every vaccine, and they want to boost those antibody levels back up again. But they're going to go down again in 6 to 8 months. And so I fear we're going to get in an endless cycle of boosting every year. What is very clear, as I've just said, is that we still prevent serious disease. We may get a mild infection after being fully vaccinated, but as a friend of mine said, I thought it was just a cold, and I would not normally have even paid attention to it. The vaccines are preventing you from getting sick and seriously ill and dying. If that changes, then I think we would need to have a third dose or some kind of a booster, perhaps. But until then, I think it's premature. And, we have a surplus of vaccines here in the U.S. I would really like to see us share it with a big part of the world that has no vaccines.
Dr. Hawkinson, did you have something to add?
No, I think.
Oh, okay.
was
I thought
just
you were
shaking my head.
you're
think,
agreeing.
I think it gets tough for the general public because, we hear, okay, 2 doses is just fine. Well, now if you're immunosuppressed, now you need 3. And now they're looking at other subpopulations, age maybe, or months out. And what we have seen consistently still, just like Dr. Racaniello said, is that we are protected from those worst cases of disease, even in those elderly. Now some information is coming out, well, maybe not in some populations like the elderly. And so at what point do we get to, well, now 3 doses is full vaccination? Or just as he said, are you getting into the cycle of continual yearly redosing or boosters as well? And I think that is still what we are trying to figure out.
So we know that Delta is spreading very quickly. Some thinking the surge is going to be worse than it was back in this past winter. Is the Delta variant more deadly, or does it cause more serious disease?
Well, that's a great question. And I don't see any convincing data that say it causes more serious disease. In fact, none of the variants that have arisen. We've had several pass through the U.S. and be displaced by new ones, and that will continue to happen. They get blamed for being more transmissible, more virulent, more deadly, more contagious. But in reality, none of this is ever proven because we're in a fast-moving pandemic, and the work that you would need to be done to prove that is very hard to do. Now, I think there'll be more variants coming along. They'll displace Delta, and others will displace them. And it's just a matter of viruses evolving that are more fit than the previous one. They're better able to reproduce in the population. And we have to remember that we have no idea if the original SARS-CoV-2, the one that arose way back in the end of 2019, if that were here today, we have no idea if it would be doing the same thing or something different. So I think Delta's here right now. It's the majority virus, and we cannot say that it's doing anything different than any other virus so far.
Do you think there's any concern that we're seeing more kids hospitalized? The pediatric hospital we have an affiliation agreement with really didn't have very many COVID patients. Now they have a lot, and relative to them, they got up to 22 or 25 patients. It's about a 300-bed hospital, and so that was before they'd have 2 or 3 patients. So, do you think that's just because masks came off and kids went all back together, or is that, do you think, some different characteristic of the Delta variant?
I don't see that any evidence that the increased infection of kids has anything to do with a variant. I think, as you say, we protected kids early on in this outbreak, right? We protected them in schools. We protected them at home in all sorts of ways. And then we did that less and less. And they are now the main population that is not vaccinated, under 12, right? So I think that that just reflects the fact that they are susceptible. They're going back to school now. In the summer, they were hanging out together, and that increased infection. I think it's going to get worse in the fall as they all go back to school, unless schools are careful and do masking and testing as much as they can.
One of the things we've talked a little bit on our program about, I'm curious to get your input, is the Delta variant so much more transmissible? And is that what happened? Because, a lot of this hotspots started in southwestern Missouri, around Springfield, Missouri, a town I tend to go down to a lot when I'm in the Ozarks doing a little fly fishing. But did it really start because the Delta variant, or did it start because all the public health measures kind of basically went away? And, we banter about that, or is it a combination of all the above?
Well, that's something I talk about all the time, because as you may know, many public health agencies, including WHO, automatically assume that Delta and other variants that arose before it are simply more transmissible. Now, the property of transmission, moving from human to human in a population, is very complicated, and it's a mix of how humans behave, it's a mix of environmental conditions, and there's something to do with the virus itself, of course. And just observing an outbreak, it's virtually impossible, in my view, to say this is the virus and this is the environment and this is the population. It's all mixed together. So I don't think you can say that Delta variant is inherently more transmissible until you do the experiments, and they're just being done. We're not going to see those results for some time. I think a lot of the spread of variants, starting with Alpha back in the UK, is because people come out of lockdown, they get together, and they transmit the virus. And we've made that point over and over again, that please recognize that human behavior is a big part of it. So as I said, if the original SARS-CoV-2 were still here, it probably would be doing the same thing in terms of outbreaks and infections, because they're driven by human interactions. And I want to point out that almost every year, variants of influenza virus arise. These are antigenic variants that escape immunity. They displace previous variants. They transmit very well through the population. We never accuse them of being more transmissible. They are simply more fit. They're antigenically selected. And unfortunately, we have to change the vaccine to accommodate them. So it's not clear to me why we aren't applying the same observation to SARS-CoV-2 as we do every year with influenza virus.
Really important question I wanted to ask you. As a well-known virologist, did you help Pfizer come up with this dadgum name for their vaccine?
Been first.
Yeah, what happened to it?
Doctor?
So Novavax looked pretty good through phase 1 and 2. So Novavax is a bit different.
Show, doctor, in your podcast. Like, what do you hear, and when information comes in, how do you kind of switch it around and try to get this? How do you tackle that information
To the global supply.
Anything to add? Okay, I have a question because, like us, Doctor, we dispute rumors daily on this show. Dr. Seitz, you have to tackle this. How do you tackle that information on your show, Doctor, and your podcast? Like, what do you hear, and when information comes in, how do you kind of switch it around and try to get through to people?
So there's information at all levels that's incorrect. All kinds of rumors that people get from all sorts of sources, not just websites, but mass media often propagates incorrect information. And we get many, many emails. You know, as part of our podcast, we read a number of emails and try and answer them. So we have learned, I mean, we've been doing this now for many years. And I think the primary approach is to be nice. Just no matter how crazy the question is, just be nice and be calm and explain it as if you were teaching a class. When I teach my classes, I'm extremely patient. No question is a dumb question. I never get impatient with people. I treat them kindly because I've learned that's how you get people to learn. And for the most part, my students respond well. And they really like calmness, patience, and enthusiasm in particular. So that's what we do. We try and explain, well, here's what actually happens. We don't say you're wrong, because that will immediately have people rise up and be defensive, right? You say, you know, that's a great point, and I understand your concern. In particular, if people have concerns about vaccination, right? The way to address them is not to say, you're out of your mind, you're crazy. No, that's going to make them defensive. Mm-hmm. I prefer to say, I understand your point completely, and here's why we think it's not really a concern. And then I think it's helpful to bring in personal experiences. Like, I and my whole family and everyone in my circle have received this vaccine, and that means we think it's safe. So calmness, go to the science as much as possible, but keep it simple. And personal experience, I think that's really the way to do it.
Address fear is, to your point, with calm
in the course of the trials, some women got pregnant.
A woman who is pregnant.
Questions?
Can I ask him one more question?
Please do.
Go ahead.
You're the first
the music.
question.
They
No,
got the theme.
you go.
I'm the community. I get the first one. I get the first one. Okay. Vaccination in pregnancy. Is it safe to give a woman who is pregnant the COVID vaccine?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, that's been tested first in phase 2 and 3 trials. Some of they excluded initially pregnant women, but in the course of the trials, some women got pregnant and their outcome was fine. And then subsequently it's been tested in women and it is fine. And the bonus is not only is the woman protected, but the fetus is, because some antibodies cross the placenta. And on the other hand, if a pregnant woman gets COVID, it can be very, very serious because, as you know, pregnancy is an immunosuppressive state, and that makes it worse. So absolutely, pregnant women should be vaccinated.
Thank you.
No, you ask questions any old time. Okay, Isaac, though, has a question, and it's for our guest. He says, this is for Dr. Racaniello, because it has to do with New York City. He says Broadway shows will be returning soon with vaccine and mask requirements. Do you think this will be sufficient? Also, do you anticipate this being standard operating procedure when it comes to
Do this.
There's that little bit of hope that you talk about.
Well, I know it's about having hope. So how does it all end? How does this particular pandemic end?
This pandemic, as Daniel Griffin likes to say, this pandemic ends with vaccination. I am convinced that vaccination of a good fraction of the population, 80% or more, let's say, would end circulation. However, many countries don't have access to vaccines, and I really think it's our job to help them. We really need to make more of an effort because it will make a big difference in curtailing the outbreak. So there will always be people who are not going to be vaccinated for whatever reason. They will eventually be infected. And then we will be in a situation where 90-some% of the world is either vaccinated or has recovered from infection. And then we will be like one of the 4 common cold coronaviruses that infect humans and give you sniffles every year. Most of us are immune to those. The disease as a consequence is very mild. I suspect maybe in 20 or 30 years that SARS-CoV-2 will be human common cold coronavirus number 5. We might not even need to vaccinate against it at that point in the future.
Okay, so Vicky wants to know, I've heard that the Delta variant is transmissible within 2 to 4 minutes instead of the 12 to 15 minutes with Alpha. Is this accurate? Who wants to jump in?
I think this is just wrong, and based on anecdotal observations, the Delta variant will be stopped by the same measures that have stopped every other SARS-CoV-2 before that. Physical distancing, masking, reduced numbers of people. There's zero evidence that non-pharmaceutical interventions do not work against Delta variant.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We've continued since the beginning of the pandemic, even through vaccination, to encourage those non-pharmaceutical interventions, especially in those high-risk places like schoolrooms and other gathering places indoors. I think that's exactly right. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question for our guest. Okay, so Donna says, so is Dr. Racaniello, are you saying that the Delta variant is not really different? And if you look at the virus similarly to the flu, aren't there worse flu variants than others?
Great question. Very good. I'm glad you brought flu in. No, I'm not saying Delta is not different. Of course it is different. It has a lot of changes in its proteins compared to the ancestral virus. And some of these changes make antibodies that you produce from, say, vaccination not work as well. But there are other properties of the virus that make it controlled by the other arm of your immune response, which is the T cells. And they seem to be the reason why the vaccines still prevent serious disease and death caused by Delta. So Delta is definitely different, but I would rather people not worry about that and just get vaccinated, because so far vaccination prevents you from getting really sick. Now, there certainly are different kinds of influenza virus that cause different severity of disease. Absolutely. If you just look at the various pandemics of influenza virus, some of them are worse than others. For example, the 2009 H1N1 was relatively mild, but the 1968 H3N2 was more severe. And those two viruses continue to circulate. And when we have an H3N2 year, there's more deaths than an H1N1. But listen to the years. We've been studying those for many years to get those data, and we just don't have it yet for Delta. So I'm not saying that we won't eventually find that this particular virus is more transmissible or maybe more virulent. We just don't know right now.
Jennifer had a question. She said she's heard talk around that the FDA approved Pfizer vaccine is different than the EUA Pfizer vaccine. Can we clear that up?
I don't think it's any different. It's just a name.
Yeah.
It's the same vaccine.
Yeah, I think that was a point of misinformation and legalese that was going around. There was somebody who was interviewed. I can't remember exactly what station. It was fact checked. That person actually, if we're talking about one particular incident, came back and said that he was mistaken and there wasn't a lot of issues around that. So it's exactly the same product, but that had came out really early on after that full approval was granted.
And for those of you who don't understand the way drugs are, we talked about a little bit about drugs. It's kind of like saying, well, Arrowhead Stadium has a different field because it's a different name. No, it may be called GEHA Field or whatever, however you say that now. But the reality is it's still Arrowhead Stadium. And that's the same thing with these drugs.
All right. Doctor, I have a question about a scientist. And since you're a scientist, I thought this is perfect for you. Taylor, can you clear this up? I heard someone making the claim that in 2015, the Nobel Prize was given to scientists involved with the discovery of the use of ivermectin to save lives in Africa against malaria and parasites. Is this true?
Yeah, it's true. One of the recipients was Bill Campbell, who is not too far from me here in New Jersey. He used to work at Merck, and he's one of the people who the Nobel was actually for a number of different drugs. He got his part was for ivermectin, which has saved many lives for treating people with parasites, as I'm sure our two clinicians here today would testify.
Yeah, which is not to say it works against SARS-CoV-2, right? Let's be clear. Because SARS-CoV-2, while it may be a sinister actor, is not a parasite, right? It's a virus.
Completely different infections.
Okay, so Donna has a question, needs some clarification. Can you explain the difference between a vaccinated person who gets ill, a breakthrough case, and a vaccinated person who does not get ill? I guess I'm wanting clarification about the vaccine and what it does again. If we are all still getting infected and transmitting, just not getting serious disease, then why are we going back to business as normal, traveling, restaurants, concerts?
There's a lot of questions wrapped up in that.
Jump in.
Yeah, I'll let
That's really
our
good.
guest take that first, and then certainly.
All right. So the one thing we have to understand when you vaccinate millions of people, everyone is slightly different. They're not all going to respond the same way, and so vaccines are never going to be 100% in all people. So even though you hear that the vaccines are, say, 90-some% good at preventing severe COVID and death, there's still a few percent left, and so some people might get severe disease. So I think the key here is that most human vaccines do not prevent infection, neither do the COVID vaccines. That's a fact of life. There has been some noise about transmission after infection of a vaccinated person. I frankly do not see the data that support that nor refute it, but most human vaccines do depress transmission. That's why herd immunity works. So I think that's why we're starting to go back to normal, because you won't get terribly sick. You're likely not to be transmitting. And that is how vaccines work. I don't know why we want to put a different bar up for COVID vaccines, but that's my take anyway.
I'm going to
Back
run
to
it back.
business as normal, traveling, restaurants, concerts.
There's a lot of questions wrapped up in that.
Jump in.
Yeah, I'll let
That's really
our
good.
guest take that first, and then certainly.
All right. So the one thing we have to understand when you vaccinate millions of people, everyone is slightly different. They're not all going to respond the same way. And so vaccines are never going to be 100% in all people. So even though you hear that the vaccines are, say, 90-some% good at preventing severe COVID and death, there's still a few percent left. And so some people might get severe disease. So I think the key here is that most human vaccines do not prevent infection, neither do the COVID vaccines. That's a fact of life. There has been some noise about transmission after infection of a vaccinated person. I frankly do not see the data that support that nor refute it, but most human vaccines do depress transmission. That's why herd immunity works. So I think that's why we're starting to go back to normal, because you won't get terribly sick. You're likely not to be transmitting. And That is how vaccines work. I don't know why we want to put a different bar up for COVID vaccines, but that's my take anyway.
It's
All right, so I just wanted to get to a couple of points that was made in this particular video. If you're interested in seeing the whole thing, excuse me, if you're interested in seeing the whole thing, you know what I'm saying? I could share it. Actually, I'm gonna put it in the chat right now. You can watch it from the beginning because there's some interesting points made, especially the one that I just replayed regarding the vaccines. Like I said, the vaccines are working well, very well. They're working so well that most of us don't even know that we actually are having protection. We have been in settings among people who are not vaccinated, who've been infected with COVID and don't know that they're infected with COVID, who are transmitting the disease to other people. Notice how I said that, transmitting the disease to other people. But yet we're afforded the protection of our vaccines to protect us. So if we do have some type of, if we are infected, you heard, Vince say, or Dr. Vince Racaniello say, right? The vaccines weren't set up to stop what? Infection. So he said, we start seeing these little cold-like symptoms, things of that nature. You've also heard me say that several times before. You heard Cedric say it on the pseudo killers if you was paying attention. But this is the ingredient here. This is what we're working with. We're trying to turn the corner. We're trying to reduce symptoms. We're trying to bring ourselves out of this so we can get back to normal. So I want to go to the movie theaters. I want to kick my feet up and I want to eat some movie theater popcorn. You know what I'm saying? Listen to the surround sound, watch a nice little movie and not worry about it. If something in there is vibing out, trying to infect me, I'm protected. Because I know the people around me are vaccinated as well and protected. So we really just, you know what I'm saying? We're not a viable host for COVID no more. I mean, for SARS-CoV-2. So we're trying to get rid of that. But we can't get to that if we have people in their feelings about certain things or miseducated in certain areas. So Sutek says, I can feel COVID in the air every time I go to that crowded dispensary. I know my jab got to be working. That boy crazy. The unvaccinated the unvaccinated is messing it up for everybody, but we just got to continue to do what we need to do. So today's lesson was about viral loads, and it is important related to SARS-CoV-2. So hopefully this gave us some understanding. I did put the sources in the description of the video. I appreciate everybody who tuned in and rocked out with me for an hour and a half. I'm not going to hold anyone up longer. May this be another referral video to other people that may not have seen, know anything about viral load, who may be misrepresenting viral load, and then you can give them this as a learning lesson or a teaching tool to help them go through that. That's what all of my videos are for, whether it's on the Science with Sean channel, whether it's on the Mossy Warrior Clan channel. Again, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I ain't holding nobody up, especially after that pseudo killers stint. Peace out.